It's 2019, and the Democrats still don't know who independent voters are. Uh, I it's a mystery. I got a couple articles here. I'm gonna skim through this one real fast. This is by the Daily Wire, just because it sets up my other one. It's a it's unfortunately with Hillary Clinton in it. I wish she would just go away, but she won't. Hillary warns Democrat candidate must be able to win the Electoral College. Twice failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton urged supporters on Monday to elect Democrat presidential nominee who can win the Electoral College in 2020. We hope that whoever ends up nominated can win the Electoral College, she told a crowd. I'm not reading her book name to promote it. I think several of our candidates could win the popular vote, but as I know, that's not enough. The former Secretary of State famously won the popular vote in 2016, receiving 2.8 million more votes than Trump. She didn't get the number of electoral college votes. I don't think we have a choice. We have to win. Clinton urged the crowd of 2,000 people. She further noted that the Democrats need to work hard for your preference in the primary. They should make sure to close ranks about whoever is nominated. Okay, that's essentially the article. Um, she is partially right about this. I mean, they do have to win the electoral college. Uh, the problem that they're running into is that yes, while these candidates like Hillary Clinton and then uh, people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are very popular among liberal states, crushing the popular vote doesn't really mean anything, as she came to find out. And we're going to look into why they don't understand who independent voters are and why it doesn't matter if you crush liberal states. It doesn't matter if you are extremely popular among your own kind. That doesn't mean you're going to win the electoral college. And for some reason, they're just figuring this out now. Um, Let me start by saying that this is by Pew Research. This is just to show you guys the graphs. Everybody should know this. Nearly 4 in 10 U.S. adults, 38%, identify as politically independent, but most lean towards one of the two major parties. Only 7% of Americans don't express any partisan leaning, while 13% lead Republican, 17% lead Democrat. This doesn't necessarily mean they say Republican and Democrat because of, that's your only two party options. But that just because you lean towards Democrat doesn't mean you're part of the Democrat Party or support them particularly. It just means you support those type of policies. Just in America, we only have two ways of looking at it. All right, this is what I really wanted to talk about. This is an article by the New York Times. A sliver of the electorate could decide 2020. Here's what these voters want: a demographically disparate group values moderation and great change, by Nate Cohen. Just by the title, you can tell where this is going. Today's America is so deeply polarized that it can be hard to imagine that there are people who are really not sure whether they'd vote for President Trump or his Democratic rival. But these mythic, quasi-Tasmanic, unicorn swing voters are very real, and there are enough of them to decide the next presidential election. Either this man lives under a rock, like he lives in like these Los Angeles areas or New York in the middle of the big city and has no idea he has no idea that these voters have ever existed, that there's ever been an independent vote. I understand that, as he said, these people who are constantly involved in politics and stuff are constantly they're extremely polarized, and they think everybody is either one side or the other extreme to the extreme. But that's just not the way it is. I understand that a lot of polls try and spin it that way, but that's just not how real life is. Let me keep reading. They are similar in holding ideological inconsistent views, but they otherwise span all walks of life. Based on analysis of 569 respondents to the recent New York Times Upshot Siena College surveys in the 6 closest states carried by President Trump in 2016. These voters represent 15% of the electorate in all of the battleground states, and they say that there's a chance they'll vote for either Mr. Donald Trump or the Democrat. They don't neatly fit into archetypes of swing voters like so-called suburban soccer moms. In fact, men are likely to be undecided than women, or more likely to be undecided than women. And they are not necessarily the white voters without a college degree, particularly in the Midwest, who decided the last election. These people always have to put in these slights. at people who vote in places they don't like. The poll adds a new mix of characters to the quadrennial cast of swing voters, like a somewhat conservative college-educated suburban mom or man who does not approve of the president's performance, but strongly opposes the single-payer health system, or a young man, perhaps even black or Latino, who is not conservative on policy, but represents or resents his generation's stringent cultural norms and appreciates the president's defiant critique of political correctness. And this paragraph right here is what they didn't get in the last election, and maybe they're waking up. But this group of swing voters who they've never discovered before are exactly who voted for Trump for these reasons. They don't like the extreme policies of Bernie Sanders. They don't like Elizabeth Warren's extreme policies. They weren't a fan of all the stuff Barack Obama was doing towards the end, of jamming through the healthcare system, all that kind of stuff. They just weren't a fan of that stuff. They weren't a fan of polarizing racial things one way or the other. They want policy. And later on in the article, there's a quote from a guy that I thought was really great. And if I could shake this man's hand, I would, because he explains it perfectly. He's a Hispanic man, or I think they say Latino in this, that really captured what everybody else thinks. But let me read on. For now, these persuadable voters in the battleground states have a favorable view of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, but not Elizabeth Warren, our poll is showing. And that just backs up what I said before. Joe Biden is more moderate. He is, I guess, one of the old elite kind of people, and these swing voters or older men who are kind of one way or the other, could vote either way, would prefer somebody like Joe Biden, even though they understand how corrupt he is and that he is more of a I guess he's more of the party kind of hardliner. They prefer him to somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who is completely out wackadoo in wackadoo land for the extreme liberals these days. Even Bernie Sanders, they have a favorable view of him, but his more extreme views they don't like. That's why he is still less favorable than Biden. Persuadable voters are so powerful because their votes count twice. It basically says they can they simultaneously lower Democrat votes and increase Republicans. That's why they hate libertarian third-party votes, which brings me to this last article. The last part I wanted to read of this was a quote by Hillary Clinton that I thought was disgusting and just shows you why Hillary Clinton and her types are bad people. Do not let anyone know to vote third-party, Clinton added at her book promotion event Monday. I understand that there's a thing in America of people think you're throwing away your vote to put them in third parties, but it's not. And this shows exactly why. Because she knows, as the Pew article said, that the majority of independents lean Democrat. So that if they voted straight by what they lean, the Democrats would win every time. The problem is when they decide, no, I hate your Democrat candidate, and no, I'm just not voting Republican because I don't like him either, is they'll vote independent. And when they vote independent, then all of a sudden it's whoever. It's whoever, because the more Republican ones may lean that way, and they may vote for them just because they're less dissatisfied with their Republican leaning candidate. So that's why the Democrats hate third parties so much, and I think it's disgusting, because I'm going to be the first to tell you that I think a third party vote is 100% necessary, and I wish we could have more candidates running for it. And she is a terrible person. Anyway, let me move on. I'm going to skip down a little bit. As a group, they are 57% male, 72% white, and 35% have college degrees. Most, 69%, say they would usually vote for a mix of both Democrat and Republican candidates. Among those who voted in 2016, 48% they voted for Mr. Trump, 33% voted for Clinton, and 19% voted for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein or no one. And there that is. These people vote for third-party candidates, Gary Johnson and Jill Stein, way more than the normal the normal voter. I say normal voter. These are the normal voters. They aren't the politically one way or the other vote for whoever types. They vote 19% for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein, who at the most garner 2 to 4% of a vote in the national elections, and that's being very generous. Those who voted in the midterm election voted for a Republican congressional candidate by 1 point. These potentially persuadable voters are divided on major issues like single health care, immigration, taxes. Just your average person who, like me, can go either way. I like to say I'm middle of the road like these guys and lean more conservative on a lot of things. But that's policy. I lean conservative on spending, I guess. I don't on taxes, things like that. I'm more liberal when it comes to social issues. I'm not some crazy liberal SJW type. I'm definitely not that. People of those types would probably think I'm a Nazi. I'm very, very in the middle, but with a definite lean towards conservative type stuff. One of these days I'm going to do one of those tests. I think maybe soon, just so you guys see where I'm coming from whenever I put out an article. Immigration I'm pretty conservative on, but other social issues I'm less so. I'm more of a libertarian type on that kind of stuff, where I'm like, live and let live without pressing your view on others. And I think that's the majority of people. The majority of people are probably more like me. We can fight over immigration, we can fight over taxes, but on the social issues, I'm pretty sure I agree with, or most people agree with me probably 99% of the time. Let me keep reading. Overall, 40% describe themselves as conservative compared to 16% who say they're liberal. 40% are moderate. Just reinforce my point. Trump leads Miss Warren, 49% to 27% among these groups. He holds a narrow 43 to 37 edge over Mr. Biden, a slight improvement over the president of Republican performance in the midterms. I'm not sure if that's changed over the last couple of weeks, but I think this is a relatively new article. I think it was from today or yesterday. What explains this group's Republican tilt? Some fairly likely Republican voters could be remaining open-minded to an unspecified Democrat voter nominee, but are quickly returning to the president's side against a known challenger. And I think what a lot of the Democrat types, the guy who wrote this article, don't understand is that the majority of your old school Democrats and obviously their children are much more conservative on a lot of things. Your old school Democrat is much different from today's Democrat. A lot of them probably align more with Republican thinking these days on most issues, but the ones they feel strongly about puts them over to the Democrat side. Things like unions are old school Democrat points that they don't agree with conservatives on, and that's a big break for them. And Democrats don't understand that these people probably these days lean more conservative, but will go either way. So whenever somebody like Biden is their candidate, they're going to choose Biden. But when you choose Elizabeth Warren, they're going to go towards the other option because they don't want to go that far. So if there's a sliding scale, the most they will go left is 30%. The most they will go right is 10%. So if you pass that 30% threshold on the wrong side, they'll flip, and vice versa. And then when, like I said before, if you go both ways on each side, you go past 10% on one way on one candidate and 30% on the other, they'll go for the third party candidate. You get what I'm saying? It's very simplified, but that's what I think is the best way to put it. These truly persuadable voters supported Democrat congressional candidates in 2018 by 8 points. I have less developed views on the presidential race. They support Mr. Biden over the president, 38% to 27%, but prefer the president to Miss Warren, 37 to 20. Mr. Sanders is in between, the president leading him 34 to 32%. This group voted for Mr. Trump by a smaller margin in 2016, 37% to 30%, with the rest casting votes from minor candidates. Again, just proving it. They voted a much bigger spread towards the very extreme candidates, less so for the more moderates. Simple. Now, I wanted to go down here because there's just more of the same. This was the guy I was talking about earlier that I thought hit it out of the park. Mr. Steve Bassarart, 28, is getting his PhD in computer science, describes himself as a Democrat, yet he would consider voting for Mr. Trump depending on the Democratic nominee. If it were Miss Warren, he'd vote Republican, he said. I think she's going too far left, which would take our country in a bad direction. Mr. Bassarart is not a fan of Mr. Trump's personality, but he says overshadowing some of his accomplishment. But he says it's overshadowing some of his accomplishments. There are plenty of things not to like about Trump, he said, but because he says things that are not nice and potentially racist. Mr. Bassarart, who is also Latino, I care for somewhat about those things, but mostly care about his policies. But because at the end of the day, that's what affects people. And that is the biggest point, is that when the Democrats try and make this all about, oh, he's a racist Nazi, all this kind of stuff, he's a white supremacist, a lot of people don't care about that stuff because they know it's probably not true. He may say things that are like, ooh, that was weird. You know, he may say dumb stuff, like when he took the picture with him with the taco salad. You know, that's stuff that you probably shouldn't do, but it's not actually it's not that bad. Maybe it's like, oh, that's not tasteful, maybe borderline racist in some cases on things. But a lot of the people are willing to overlook that stuff because they know as long as he's not making policies about race, who cares? It's about the stuff that he puts on paper. It's about immigration. It's about the economy, stupid. All that kind of stuff. This is stuff that most general voters, most independents care about. Obviously, some people do care about that stuff. And a lot of times it's the liberal voters who you weren't going to change their mind anyway. But the independents, they care about your policies. And that's who you're trying to persuade. And when people like Elizabeth Warren are the ones up front, you're going to get crushed because of it. You're going to get crushed by these independents in voting because you are going way out of the extremes, and that's not what they're asking for. You may pander and find a rousing support from your liberal types, but not the independents. I'm going to read this last little part and we'll wrap her up. Persuadable men and women generally hold similar views on the issues, including on the president, but they're deeply split over the assault weapons ban, with persuadable women supporting the assaults ban by 26-point margin and men oppose it by 18, including 42% of the undecided men and women are strongly opposed. The undecided white working class voters often seem as if they would be quite receptive to Democrats based on their views and the issues. They support single-payer health care, for instance, but they approve of the president's performance by a comfortable 63% to 32% margin, and they're about as conservative as Republicans on cultural issues that divide today's policies by a margin of 84% to 9%. They say political correctness has gone too far. They say academics and journalists look down on people like them, and agree demonstration against whites discrimination against whites has become a big problem as discrimination against minorities. And there it is. This paragraph right here, the guy above, and this paragraph explains entirely why they're losing independent votes. They all lean Democrat the majority of the time, but they don't like these issues. These issues that divide based on liberal and conservative lines that SJWs press down on, and these bans on assault weapons, which not even most Democrats support, bans on just weapons in general. Look, that's going to lose you the election, and it's weird to see Democrats waking up to that now. There's a lot more to this article here. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but that's really what you need to know. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Are Democrats waking up finally, or is this just this guy pissing in the wind? Because I don't think they are. The Elizabeth Warren types, the Bernie Sanders types are probably going to be who is put up to bat, and they're probably going to get crushed. Bernie Sanders less so. I think Bernie has a good chance to beat Trump if he was up there, but the man is old, real old. If you've watched any of my first videos, he had a heart attack this year, so I'm not sure he could win. If he doesn't, it would be a very close vote. And I think Elizabeth Warren would get absolutely slaughtered. Absolutely slaughtered. So if you want a Trump victory, Let's put out those extreme liberals because these independents aren't going to vote that way. All right. Thank you.